Good evening. Hello, 14. Hello, Angrink. Hello, Phoenix. Guilty God, thank you so much for the hydrated posture check. Hello, Inwa. Good evening, everyone. How is everyone tonight? Hello, Chubio. How was everyone's day? Hello, Kome. How are all of you? How was your day? Did I eat yet? Yes, I've had my meal for the day. Did you all eat yet? You couldn't find any stories? It's okay. I have quite a few prepared for you all tonight. I have 3 short stories and 2 properly length ones. You just got home from school. Welcome home. You did exceptional today. The food was nice. I'm glad. So, before we start, are you all comfortable? Are you all rested? Ready for me to tuck you into bed? That's good, that's good. I hope you're all prepared tonight because these 5 stories I've heard are quite scary. But don't worry, I will always be with you. Hello, Chris. Good evening. Did you eat yet? You're gambling in chat. That's funny. You should be comfortable in bed by now, because I'm ready to tuck you in. Natterdays, thank you so much for being here. Hello. How are you? What time is it for you? Did you eat yet? You had mushroom soup and fried fish fingers. It was soft. Go me. That a 4 million points redeem is the end of my channel. You all want to gamble? Let's not gamble tonight. We'll gamble another day. Hello, Rep. It's 8 a.m. for you. Good morning. How was your sleep? Did you eat breakfast yet? You have to study. I see, Chris. I see. We'll start in a few minutes after you're already in bed. What did you all do today? Tell me about your day. My day was pretty interesting. I started my day pretty late from my usual time. You had a duty today in school. I see. I see. It was alright. Yes, it is just a typical Tuesday, isn't it? Forgive my joke. I'm just lifting the mood for later. You know this background? Yes, sexy. It's that time of the week again. You got hired today. You're going to make a manga kome. That's amazing news. I am so proud of you. You did excellent. I always believed in you. Welcome, Saxy. How's your day, Saxy? So as I was saying, my day started with an idea. I was talking to our dear darling mods about this idea, and I think they'll support me and this idea of mine. I can't tell you what it is yet, though. Not until everything has been finalized. I am currently waiting for signs from the universe if I should proceed with this idea or not. It's not that urgent, though. It's just something that I want to do to thank all of you for the support that you've been giving me. But like I said, I can't tell you what it is yet. Anyway, we should start. Oh, what amazing timing, Dobby. We're just about to start. Hello, Dobby. How are you? Hello, Bacon. Thank you so much for the follow. Welcome, Raiders. Welcome. Hi. My name is Yin. I am dead. Welcome to my grave. Feel free to stay for a while, but if you want, you can stay forever. You came in at the right time. Yes, you did, Toby. Thank you so much for sharing your community with me. We're just about to start our story for the night. One of 5, actually. Hello, Sam Gipp. Welcome. I hope you all enjoy your time. Chamigiri, hello. Hello. Can you all hear me properly? Oh, thank you so much for the follow. Yes, we're doing scary stories tonight. This is a weekly thing now because I truly enjoy reading to all of you. It's that one night of the week where I tuck you all into bed and read to you stories from other souls in some other life. Anyway, let's begin. This one is entitled Something Walks Whistling Past My House Every Night at 3:03. Every night, no matter the weather, something walks down our street whistling softly. You can only hear it if you're in the living room or the kitchen when they walk by, and it always starts exactly at 3:03. The sound starts faint, somewhere near the beginning of the lane near the Carson place, where towards the middle of the street, so the whistling moves past us before fading away in the direction of the cul-de-sac. When I was younger, my sister and I would sneak into the kitchen some nights to listen. Mom and Dad didn't like that we'd catch hell if they found us. But they were never too hard on us since we always stuck to the one big rule. Don't ever try to look at what was whistling. My neighborhood is a funny place. I've lived here since I was 6 and I love it. The houses are small but well kept, good-sized yards, plenty of places to roam. There are a lot of other kids here my age. I turned 13 in October. We grew up together and would always play foursquare in the cul-de-sac or roam around from back porch to back porch in the summer. This was a good place to grow up. I'm old enough to see it, and there's the two strange things here, the night whistling and the good luck. The whistling never bothered me much. Like I said, I couldn't even hear it from my bedroom. But Mom and Dad didn't like talking about it, so I've stopped asking questions. My dad is a strong guy, tall and calm. He has an accent since he moved to the US as a kid. His family, my grandparents, they're from the islands. That's what they call it. My dad, the only time he isn't so calm is if the whistler comes up. He talks a little quicker then. Eyes move faster, and he tells us not to think about it so much and to always remember the one rule, the big rule. Don't try to look outside when the whistler goes past. Not that we could even look if we wanted to see. There are shutters inside of every window, big pieces of heavy canvas that pull down from the top and latch to the bottom of the window frame. Each latch has a small lock, about the size of what you'd find in a diary. My dad locks those shutters every night before we all go to bed and keeps the key in his room. My mom, I don't know what she thinks about the whistling. I've never seen her out in the living room before at 3:03 when the sound starts. And I could see if I cracked my door open just an inch to peek. She's not out there often, at least I haven't caught her much, but once or twice a month, I think she sits out there on our big red couch just listening. The whistler has the same tune every night. It's cheerful. Da 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 dum, da 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 dum. Remember how I said there are two odd things about where I live? Well, besides our night whistler, everyone in my neighborhood is really lucky. It's hard to explain, and Dad doesn't like us talking about this part much either. But good things just seem to happen in people around here a lot. Usually, it's small things like winning a radio contest or getting an unexpected promotion at work or finding some arrowheads buried in the yard, you know, the authentic kind. The weather is pretty good and there's no crime and everybody's gardens bloom extra bright in the fall. A million little blessings I've heard my mom say about living here. But the main reason we stay here, why we moved here in the first place, is my sister Nola. She was born very sick something with her lungs. We couldn't even bring her home when she was born, and only visit her in the hospital. She was so small, I remember. Small even compared to the other babies. A machine had to breathe for her. We moved into our house here to be closer to the hospital. As soon as we moved here, Nola started getting better. The doctors couldn't figure it out. They chalked it up to whatever they were doing, but all they could tell was they were confused. My parents knew. Even I knew. Nola getting better was just another one of the million little blessings we got for living in our neighborhood. So that's why we stayed here, even after we found out that for every small miracle that happens here every day, now and then, some bad things happen. But they only happen if you look for the whistler. See, our neighborhood has a welcoming committee. They show up with macaroni casserole and a gift basket, and a manila folder whenever someone new moves in. They're very friendly. 4 people showed up when we moved in 7 years ago. The committee made small talk, gave me a Snickers bar, and took turns holding Nola. It was her first week out of the hospital, so they were extra careful. Then, the committee asked to speak to my parents in private, so I was sent to my room, where I still managed to hear nearly every word. The welcoming committee told my parents about how nice the neighborhood was. Really exceptionally hard to explain kind of nice. And then they told my parents about the ever hard to explain whistling that happened every morning at 3:03 and ended at the kick of 3:05. The group, our new neighbors, warned my parents that the whistling was quiet, would never harm or hurt us as long as we didn't look for what was making the sound. This party, they stressed, and I pushed my ear into the door, straining to hear them. People who went looking for the whistler had their luck change, sometimes tragically. A black cloud would hang over anyone that looked. Anything could go wrong. Would. The manila envelope the committee brought over contained newspaper clippings, stories about car accidents, ruined lives, public deaths, and freak accidents. Not everyone dies, I heard the committee tell my dad, but the life goes out of them. Even if they live, there's no light in them ever again. No presence. My mom, I could tell she wasn't taking it seriously. She kept asking if this was some prank they play on the new neighbors. At one point, my mom got angry, accused the committee of trying to scare us out of our new home, asked them if they were racist on account of my dad being from the islands. My dad calmed her down, told her he could tell our new neighbors were sincere and they were just trying to help us. He explained that he grew up hearing these kinds of stories from his mom and that he knew there were strange things that walked among us. Some of those strange things were good and some were bad, but most were just different. After the committee left, Dad went out of the hardware store. They brought the canvas blinds, the latches, and the locks and installed them on every window in our house after dinner. The first night in our new house, I crept out of my room at 3 a.m., only to find my dad awake sitting on the living room couch, holding my baby sister. My dad held up his finger in a shush motion, but patted the couch next to him. I sat, and we waited. Exactly at 3:03, we heard the whistling. Da da, da 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 dum, da da, da 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 dum. It came, And it went, just like our neighbor said. The whistling returns each night, and we never look and enjoy our million little blessings every day. Nola breathes on her own, and she's grown into a strong, clever girl. My dad even joined the welcoming committee. We don't get new neighbors often. Why would anyone want to leave? But when a new family moves in, my dad and the committee bring the macaroni casserole, a gift basket, and the manila folder. I can always tell by the look on my dad's face when he comes back if the family took the committee seriously, or if we'd be getting new neighbors again very soon. Not long ago, a family moved in directly next to us. The previous owner, Miss Maddie, passed away at age 105. She lived a good, long life. Our neighbors seemed like they'd fit in just fine. They believed the welcoming committee, took my dad's advice about locking shutters since they had a young child of their own. Whatever newspaper clippings were in that manila envelope, whatever evidence, my dad never let us see. But I imagine it must have been awfully convincing since our neighbors got along with no issues for the first month. One night, when our new neighbors had to leave town, they sent their son, Holden, to stay with us. He was 12, a year under me in school. I didn't know him very well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off after dinner, I could tell it was going to be a bad time. Do you know who is always out there whistling every night? Holden asked the moment the adults left the room. The three of us were sitting in the den, some Disney movie playing idly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a glance. "We don't talk about it," I said. "I think it's that weirdo that lives in the big yellow house on the corner," Holden said. "Mr. Tolles?" my sister asked. "No way, he's really nice." Holden shrugged. "Must be a psycho killer then." Nola tensed. "We don't talk about it," I repeated. "Let's go to my room and play some Nintendo." We spent the next few hours playing games, eating popcorn, and then watching movies. A typical sleepover, but I could see Holden was getting angsty. After my parents had wished us a good night, locked the blinds, and gone to bed, Holden stood up from his beanbag and walked over to where Nola and I were sitting on my bed. "Have you ever tried looking?" he asked. "It's nearly time." Like most sleepovers, we'd conveniently ignored any suggestion of a bedtime. I was shocked to see he was right. It's almost 3 a.m. I sighed. "We don't." "See, I can't even try to look because my dad locks the blinds every night and he hides the key," he continued, ignoring me. "So does our dad," Nola said. "No," Holden replied. "No, he doesn't. I saw him do it," I said, a little sharper than I meant to sound. Holden grinned. "Your dad locks the blinds, yeah, but he doesn't hide the key. He keeps it right on his normal keychain." "So?" I asked, worried I already knew what he was about to say next, because I had noticed that my dad didn't bother hiding the key anymore after all those years, because he knew we took it seriously. "So, after your dad locked up before your parents went to bed, I went to the bathroom, and on my way, I may have peeked into their room, and I may have seen your dad's keychain on his nightstand. And I maybe went and borrowed the key to the blinds." Nola and I stared at his grin only grew wider. "You're lying," I said. Holden shrugged. "You can check if you want. Just open your parents' door and look. You'll see his keychain right there on the nightstand." "Stay there," I told both of them. "Don't move a muscle." I hurried over to my parents' room but hesitated at the door. If Holden wasn't lying, my dad would be angry. Beyond angry. I was scared thinking about it, but more scared of an open window with the whistler right outside. I opened the door, barely an inch, and looked in, but it was too dark to see. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the room. 2 steps into the dark and I froze. The whistling started, and I could hear it clearly from my parents' room. I never realized, but they must have heard the sound every night since we moved into the house. They never told us. I don't think I could have slept through it. I stood there, listening for the whistling to come, unsure whether I should turn on a light to call out for my dad. Soft sounds from the living room brought me back to reality. Nola, I yelled, running out of my parents' room. Holden and Nola were standing near the window, next to the front door. Holden wasn't lying. I could see him fumbling with the lock on one of the blinds. I heard a click. He did have the key. Holden let out a quick laugh. Nola stood next to him, hunched up, afraid, but maybe curious. The whistling was right outside our house now. I think I made a sound, called out. I can't remember. Time felt frozen. Clock hands nailed to the face, but I found myself moving. I'm not fast. I've never been athletic. Somehow, though, I covered the space between myself and Nola in a moment. My eyes were locked on her, but I heard Holden pull the blind all the way down so I could release. I heard the snap of it start to raise, and I heard the whistling just on the corner side of the window. But I had my arms around Nola, and I turned to us so she was facing away from the window. At the same time, I jammed my eyes shut. The blind whipped open. The whistling stopped. I felt Nola shaking in my arms. "Don't look okay," I told her. "Don't turn around." We were positioned so that she was facing back towards the hallway, and I was facing the window. My eyes were still closed. I felt her nod into my shoulder. I reached out with the arm not holding Nola and tried to touch Holden. My hand brushed against his arm. He was shaking worse than Nola. "Holden?" I asked. Silence. I reached past him and gingerly felt for the window, eyes still sealed shut. The glass was cold against my fingertips, colder than it should have been for that time of the year. I moved my hand up the window, searching for the string to the blind. The glass began to get warmer and further as I reached, and there was a gentle hum feeding back into my fingertips. I tried not to think about what might be on the other side of the window. Finally, I touched the string and yanked the blind shut. I opened my eyes. In the dim light leaking out from the kitchen, I could make out Holden, pale and small, staring at the now closed window. "Holden?" I asked again. He turned towards me and he screamed. Everything became a flurry of motion. Lights sparked to life in the hall, then the living room. My parents' footsteps thud across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn to look back at them. My eyes were glued to Holden. He was pale. He had bit his lips so hard that there was a thin red line of blood running down from his chin, and he'd wet himself. "What happened?" my dad asked from behind me. I managed to swivel away from Holden and look back. He looked. I've never seen my dad scared before, but I saw it that night, in that moment, an old, ugly terror stitched on his face, my parents' fear. "Just Holden?" he mouthed to me. I nodded yes. My dad let out a breath. He looked so relieved I nearly expected him to cheer. But then he turned to Holden, and my dad's face changed. I wondered if he felt bad for feeling good that Holden was the only one that looked. There was a knock on the door. We all froze. Holden whimpered. "Don't answer it," my mom said. She stood at the threshold of the hall. I'd always thought she was a skeptic and just humored my dad about the windows and the Whistler, but that night we were all believers. I noticed that both my parents had baseball bats and they must have taken them from their bedroom. The knock came again, louder this time. "Please don't open the door," Holden whimpered. My dad walked over to him, hugged him close. "We won't," my dad promised, still holding his bat. "Nothing is coming in here tonight." This time, the knocking was loud enough to rattle the door. Holden screamed again and Nola clutched her arms around my neck. Mom came over and knelt down next to us, wrapping my sister and me close. "Call the police," my mom whispered to my dad. The knocking instantly stopped. My dad looked over his shoulder at us. "Do you think?" He was cut off by a frantic knocking that trailed off to a polite tap. "Police," something said from the other side of the window. The voice from the outside sounded exactly like my mom, like a parrot repeating the words back to her. "Police. Call the police. Police." My mom pulled us closer. "Police. Police. 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 Please stop," I heard my mom whisper. "I don't think calling them will help," my dad said. "How will we know when they're the ones at the door?" The knocking came back harder than before. The door shook, then it stopped. After a long moment, I heard the knocking again, but it was coming from the back door. We all turned together towards the back door, but the knocking immediately returned to the front door. Front to back to front, loud then quiet, then loud again. Suddenly, the sound was coming from both doors at once, big, heavy blows like a sledgehammer. Then something started rapping against all of the windows in the house, then the walls. It was like we were living inside a drum with a frozen 12 people trying to play at once. Or that we were a turtle and something was attempting to claw us out of our shell. "Stop!" Holden yelled. The knocking died. "I won't tell," Holden said, staring at the door. "I promise I won't tell anyone what I saw. Just please go away." We waited for nearly a minute. Then we heard it. A soft tap coming from the window. The window that Holden had looked through earlier. Then, Holden started crying, sobbing like a prisoner watching gallows being built outside their cell. My dad held him, brushed his hair but never lied to him, never told him things would be okay. The tapping at the window went on for the rest of the night. We huddled together in the living room for I don't know how long. Eventually, my mom tried to take us kids into the room while my dad stayed to watch the door. But the moment we moved into the bedroom, the knocking came back. So loud, it was impossible to ignore. I was afraid the door couldn't take it. We went back into the living room and the knocking stopped. Only tap, tap, tap on the window remained. None of us slept that night. The tapping stopped at 7 a.m. That's about the time the sun comes up here. We waited another 2 hours before my dad opened the blinds from one window. He made us all go back to my parents' bedroom first. I heard him open the door, then came back in. "Okay," he told us. "It's done." Holden's parents came back around lunchtime. My mom and dad walked Holden over to his house, and they all went inside for quite a while. Nola and I watched from the windows. She stuck to me the whole day, right at my side, sometimes holding my hand. When my parents came back, they looked grim but wouldn't tell us what they said to Holden's family. It was a Sunday, so we spent the day together, ordered pizza, and watched movies. That night, I slept in my room. Nola and my mom were in bed with me. My dad in a chair he'd pulled over. There was no knocking that night, or any night since. We didn't see much of Holden or his parents for the rest of that week. But by Thursday, there was a moving truck in their driveway. Nola and I watched them packing the whole afternoon after school. What sticks with me the most is how tired Holden and his parents looked. All three had the same pallor, grin mouths, with lightless eyes. Even from across the street, I could tell something was very wrong. Holden and his family were gone before sunset. I remember the welcoming committee said to my parents when they moved in, "Not everyone who looks at the Whistler dies, but even those that live there have the light go out of them, and the rest of their lives are full of misfortune. A million little tragedies." I think Holden's parents must have looked, either to comfort him or that they didn't believe or share the burden if they did. I watched Nola some days, happy and young and alive, and I wonder if I'd been slower, if she'd looked out the window that night. Would I have looked to comfort her, to share that burden? I'm glad I don't have to find out. We still live in that house, in that neighborhood. We still hear our Whistler walking past every night. The blessings, the luck, the good things here are too good to leave. But we're careful. We don't have friends over to spend the night anymore. My dad hides the keys to the blinds every night very well, very, very well. Not that I've gone looking. Some things you just don't need to look for. The end. And that's why you do not go against your parents' wishes. Thank you so much for the follow, Croyer. Thank you, Neva, for being here. Thank you for the flower, Opti. Thank you for the follow, Aerosurf. Ratnak, if you're still here, you're a good boy, Rat. You're a good boy, Ratnak. Good boy. You don't know what your perspectives are at whistling. Anyone wants to be called a good boy? You're a good boy, Enma. You're a good boy. Good boy, Enma. You hate the darkness now. You don't have to hate the darkness, Saxy. The darkness is always with you. The darkness is the only thing that embraces you during the night. You're pretty happy you grew up listening to your parents. Hello, Jupy. Hello. How are you? What time is it for you, Jupy? Did you eat yet? That was our first story for the night. The next story will be a short one because I need to rest my throat. I am drinking my tea right now. 14:53. I see. So, it's the afternoon for you. Good afternoon, GP. Have you eaten your lunch yet? Also, hello, Baku. I noticed you were here. Yes, I am hydrating well because I will be reading stories for you all tonight. You're not doing well? Oh no, did you come from the doctor again? Did you eat yet, Baku? Just a meeting, I see. You must be very tired. My voice is very beautiful. Thank you, GP. Thank you. That means a lot to me. I hope you enjoy your time here because tonight I will be reading all of you stories from other souls. Hello, Banana Cat. Welcome. Did you eat yet? Did you eat yet, Banana Cat? Also, Baku, I noticed you changed your name. How long has it been? I'm sorry for not noticing it earlier. I'm sorry if I'm not able to cater to everyone during my readings because you're getting Raven vibes. Well, it's because I don't want the immersion to break, so I make it a point to do the redeems and greet everybody after I read you all my story. So I'm very sorry. Don't I have legs? I do have legs, but it won't make sense for me to read to you while you're looking at my legs. You have to use the bathroom, yes. Everybody go on a bathroom break. I'll wait for you all before we start our next story for the night. Thank you for the flowers, Banana Cat. Hello, baby. How are you, baby? Thank you for being here. Actually, I should, when we do these kinds of streams, our story times, I should have a pinned message for all of the newcomers. Oh, thank you so much for the follow, baby. What time is it for you? Did you eat yet? You're gonna clean the dishes? Yes, yes. You have your blanket? That's good, that's good. Let me tuck you into bed and read you one of my stories. You're working with your group, Banana Cat. Good luck. It's small and light blue. That's adorable. You're so excited. I really hope you like this one. Let me just type in my message for everybody who's new. I'm sorry for not greeting you while I'm reading the story. I do not want to ruin the immersion. You're a big year old. Hello, Lloyd. There you go. Let's pin this message. Because this is very important, I guess. For everybody new who is joining us. It's okay if I don't read to you. What do you mean? Oh, I mean if I don't read you, yes. I will get back to all of you. Because I don't want you all to feel left behind. Yes, hopefully they read the pinned message. Posture check and hydrate. Yes, thank you. I have my tea right now. I am drinking throat coat because this is going to help my throat, I guess, get better and smoother while I read to all of you. Let me do that again. I'm almost done with my tea, actually. It's gotten cold. It's not your fault, and it's the first time you're here so early. Thank you for being here, Lloyd. Thank you for looking forward to spending time with me. I truly appreciate it every time you're all here with me. So this next story is entitled A Package Marked Return to Sender. My neighbor is one of those annoying wannabe YouTube personalities. Over the years, I've seen him cough out cinnamon, lay flat on the hood of his car as it slowly creeps down the driveway, and douse himself with lukewarm water, all the while screaming epic win, epic fail, or fuck, epic maintenance of the status quo for all I know. It can get tiring to watch him go out of his shenanigans in the pursuit of viral fame, so when he knocked on my door the other day and told me he was going away for a few weeks and asked if I get his mail, honestly, it was a relief. I can't explain the peace of mind I had knowing I didn't have to brace myself for any of his stupidity for a while. I was always afraid his stunts would wind up bleeding all over into my life. Things were pretty much normal the first couple of days. He received a few bills, a bit of spam, and what I could only assume was a birthday card. Then, one evening, I got home to find a cardboard box waiting on his front porch. With big red letters that was written, Return to Sender. I'm no small fry, but I admit I had trouble lifting the box on my own. It was really freaking heavy. Lugging it across the road to my house was even harder, and I quickly realized that there was no way I was going to drag it up the stairs through my front door. So I decided I'd leave his package in my garage. It wasn't like I kept my car in there. The garage door was a piece of shit and I refused to open without a good thug and a whack. It was less trouble just leaving the car in the driveway than it was to fight with the garage door every morning and night. In hindsight, I should have set the package down while I struggled to open the tricky door. But you know how it is when you've got a good grip on something. No point in setting it down if you don't have to. It was as I kicked the door for a third time that I lost my grip on the package and it fell to the ground. I heard a light crack inside. Shit, I cursed. I hoped I hadn't broken anything important, but figured I just wouldn't tell my neighbor about it and let him assume the break happened en route. Hands-free, I managed to finally get the garage door unstuck, and boy did it screech in protest as it rolled up over me. I dragged the box the rest of the way, setting it in the corner for whatever my neighbor would come back to claim it, and then I forgot all about it. Until a few days passed, that is. I'm not sure exactly how long it took for the smell to waft in from the crack under the garage to house door, but it came in slow progression. It was a sickly, sweet odor, similar to a skunk, and for the first few days after I smelled it, I genuinely assumed that's exactly what it was. Roadkill. Roadkill that had left its mark on my house. It was only when I realized the scent was growing more intense, instead of fading, that I went looking for the source. That's when I opened the garage door, and that's when the odor knocked me back, holding my nose. The culprit wasn't hard to identify. The only change in my garage was the box in the corner. I remembered thinking it must have been one of those meat of the month subscription boxes. The meat must have gone rancid from being left out of the fridge for so long. How much meat could have been in there for the box to have been so large and heavy? An entire cow? I covered my nose as I approached the box, a pair of scissors in my hands. I probably wouldn't have needed to open it as it had become soggy enough at the bottom to poke through with a finger. But I wasn't about to poke my finger in the spoiled meat juices. The soggy bottom was the reason I had to open the box in the first place. If I tried to drag it out whole, everything would spill onto the floor. I was going to have to dump the pieces of meat on one garbage bag at a time and take them down to the dumpster, a process I wasn't looking forward to. My scissors tore through the tape along the top of the cardboard box. I thought the smell couldn't get any worse, but as I flipped the flaps open, I discovered a whole new gamut of stink. It was like opening a burning oven, but instead of a heat wave, I was met with waves of piss, sweat, shit, and putrefaction. It was so bad that I staggered back and had to force down a puke, begging to guzzle out of me. I didn't think I could have handled that scent mingling with the horrors coming out of the box. I'm not ashamed to admit I ran out of the door for a breath of fresh air. But in the short time that I'd spent in the garage, the smell had become so ingrained in the fabric of my clothes that it clung to me like a shadow. Nothing I tried could keep the smell out of my nostrils. Not air fresheners, not a face mask, not 3 showers and a change of clothes. Every second that box lay open in my garage was another second the smell was allowed a foothold into my home. I had to bite the bullet. I returned to the garage, the flaps of the box still open as though inviting me to look. I was prepared. A clothespin pinning my nostrils shut, a garbage bag in one hand, the strongest cleaner I could find in the other, and long rubber gloves to keep my skin from having to touch what was inside. But as it turns out, I needed none of those things. I wouldn't have to touch or clean the contents of that box. I would only have to suffer the nightmares every night. You see, there was meat in that box, but it didn't come from a cow or a pig. No, it was worse than that. It was my neighbor. Dead. Still in one piece, but dead. I called the cops, and naturally, they took me in for interrogation. It's kind of hard not to suspect the man with the corpse in his garage after all. Thankfully, they soon realized I wasn't involved. My NDA, or my DNA, might have been all over the box, but the smell might have left a mark throughout the house. There was one piece of irrefutable evidence in my neighbor's own hands that proved my innocence. a vlogging camera. They showed me the footage only once. I'm not allowed to see it, I wasn't sure. Or maybe they just felt so bad for me that they figured it couldn't hurt. Either way, I saw it. My neighbor was sitting in the box outside of a shipping facility, laughing as he told the world how he was going to mail himself across state lines. He brought pee bottles, food, a pillow, and a few flashlights. His friend, a guy I'd seen at his place several times to help with his stunts, closed the lid and presumably dropped him off for shipment. Throughout the next couple of hours, or days, honestly I'm not sure, my neighbor recorded a few short clips about his progress. I think I'm in a truck now. I can feel it moving. Must be in a warehouse. Pretty damn warm here. Still plenty of food though. That kind of stuff. And then, on the last entry, the box toppled over. He broke his neck, and that was it. The camera recorded until either the memory card got too full or the battery died. There's one thing that I didn't tell the police after they showed me the video. One thing I heard in the footage that will haunt me to the day I die. Just after the tumble that broke his neck, I heard the familiar screeching of my garage door. The end. Veru, thank you so much for that raid. I'm sorry for responding late. But for those of you who are still here, welcome, raiders. Welcome. My name is Ian. I am dead. Welcome to my grave. Feel free to stay for a while, but if you want, you can stay forever. Kaizov, Raranoa, Brielle, thank you so much for the follow. Thank you for being here. How was your stream, Beru? I was actually lurking on your stream a while ago. How was it? Nashter, welcome. How have you been? You're lost in the maze, so you think you'll be here for a while, Lloyd? As long as you enjoy your stay, that's what matters to me. Good evening, Fenris. Did you eat yet? Did you all eat yet? Various stream was good. I'm glad. Welcome, Jack. How was your day? How is Raymond? It's fun indeed. I'm glad. I'm glad. That's what's important after all. That you have fun with your streamer. You're a ghost. Am I the god, Sav? Welcome. I am a death goddess, one of many. How are you tonight? Did you eat yet? I didn't expect that ending. Did you? This is another example of the more you fuck around, the more you find out, I guess. I just finished my tea. It's already gone cold. And my throat is still feeling very tight. You hope the responses will be in a message because you don't understand English. Where are you from? Are you using a translator to talk to us tonight? Is that what's happening? Is my tea mixed with honey? No, it's not. What I'm drinking is a lemon flavored throat coat. Throat coat is supposed to be good for your throat, I guess. Hence the name. The next one will be quite long. And then after that, I'll read you 2 short ones. Who is stronger? What do you mean, Seb? I am the mother of God. No, I am not the mother of God. You love green tea? It's a classic. You love every type of tea. You should have some now. Tea is healthy for you. Mixing it with honey will help. It can be mixed with the tea that I'm drinking right now. The thing is, Inwa, I'm done drinking my tea. So maybe next time. Tomorrow, I will be resting. And on Thursday, we will be doing another... how do I say this? Throat heavy stream. Can your brother worship me? Yes, definitely next time. Please remind me to put on some tea on Thursday. You did. It's pretty good. You love coffee with cream and milk, yes. I like coffee with milk and sugar as well. I don't like coffee black. It's too strong for me. But lately, I've been trying to steer clear of drinks that aren't water. Hello, Shock. How are you? Welcome. Hello, Walter. Good evening. Thank you so much for the follow. Did you all eat yet? Can you be alive? Listen, Ashter. You're all here because I rescued your souls from damnation. You will all be reborn soon, so don't worry. And hopefully, when your time comes, when death comes for you, I hope I see you again. I hope we meet again. Thank you, 14, for the hydrate and posture check. I'm moving on to water now. That is nice. You can't do that though. You love tea too much. But not coffee and hot chocolate. Yes, coffee and hot chocolate. Coffee and hot chocolate for me requires... it needs to require... It needs, like... It needs criteria to be met. Yeah, I think that's what I'm looking for. Your time is starting, Nashtar. You will hug me. Thank you for that warm embrace. Darkness always embraces us. And sooner or later, death will wrap their arms around you as well. Our next story for tonight. It's quite long, actually. It's entitled, My Wife Has Been Peeking at Me from Around Corners and Behind Furniture. It's gone from weird to terrifying. Scherzer, thank you so much for the flower. That sounds cool, like a video game or anime code. Do you have heaven? After you leave this place, you will go to heaven, if you believe in heaven. That is my purpose here with all of you. To save your souls from damnation. This is a series, so it might be quite long. It is quite long. I'm looking at it right now. Let's start. My wife Lynn and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal, and never once have I noticed any weird behaviors or red flags. I can't stress enough how out of character this whole thing is for her. Lynn is very kind, intelligent, and thoughtful. She's always been the no-nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she'd normally do. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I loved horror. She was so scared that she didn't even make it through half of the movie before we had to turn it off. She wasn't into anything creepy and has never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea, and that's fine. But what's so strange about this is it's just so unlike her. I should also add that she never had any mental issues as far as I'm aware, and it doesn't run in her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years we've been together, I think I'd seen some sort of sign. 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen making myself some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning, and I knew I wouldn't be able to make it to the Dunkin' Donuts for my usual morning fix. I took a sip of my coffee as I hurried down the halls towards the door, when I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner ahead of me. I could only see her eyes and a strand of her long dark hair hanging against the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her. It did burn the shit out of my lips, though. "Jeez, Lynn," I said, wiping a few drops of coffee from my pants. You scared the shit out of me." She immediately popped out of view like a little kid that had been caught. I heard her scurry off towards the living room, and by the time I got to the front door, she was out of sight. It was really weird and just totally out of character of her, like I said. But I also found it kind of funny that she was being more playful and a little less serious. I shouted that I loved her and called her a weirdo. As I shut the door behind me, I heard her laughing. Her behavior was a bit odd, but it certainly wasn't something to call the priest over. I forgot about it by lunch, and by the time I got home, she was her normal self. I didn't bring up the thing she did this morning, and neither did she, and life went on. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around 2 a.m., and I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing at the kitchen island, jug of OJ in one hand, when I felt a strong feeling that I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked down at the floor and saw my wife's smiling face staring back. She was peeking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me with wide, unblinking eyes and grinning like the Cheshire Cat. I screamed. I'll admit it. Not out of irritation, but of fear. For some reason, at that moment, I was scared. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled backwards, out of my view, her hand and feet smacking the tile floor as she hurried out of the kitchen on all fours. I didn't run after her, or even yell after her. I just stood there, frozen in shock, wondering what had possessed her to do that. It took me a little longer than I'd like to admit to go back upstairs, but eventually I did. When I got to our bedroom, Lynn was lying on her side, asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while, watching her breathing to be sure she was really asleep. I had the feeling she might jump out at the moment I got into bed, but she didn't. I climbed into bed, and she didn't even move. Her breathing was soft and deep, and I was starting to wonder if I'd dreamt the whole thing. The next morning, I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing her a mug and kissing her cheek, I decided to ask her about it. "What was that about last night?" I asked, keeping my tone light so I didn't offend or embarrass her. She frowned over her cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. "You were peeking at me again from over there," I said, pointing to the spot on the floor by the kitchen island. She followed my gaze, and when she looked back at me, she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that I couldn't help but join her. "You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that?" I said. She giggled and set her cup on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. "You creep me out all the time, so I guess we're even," she teased. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove, I kept thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sounds her hands made on the floor as she crawled away. I told myself she was just trying to be silly, just trying to join me in my love for all things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her, but it still didn't sit right with me. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out from behind the couch or the living room curtains. Once, she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits on the foot of our bed. I might have even known she was there at all the junk that the trunk's old hinges had not given her away. She had the lid popped up just enough so that only half her face was peeking through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. When I finally found my voice, I asked her why on earth she was doing this. She didn't answer, but she slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I just walked away, feeling disturbed. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. I just hoped she would tire of the game quickly. Lynn didn't peek at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think she was done with her weird prank, and I was relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night, and I jokingly said that I haven't seen her peeking at me lately, and that she must have given up on her spy game. She looked up at me with a small smile and said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking around? Had I just not noticed? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching from around the corner or behind the door. I was jumpy whenever I was at home and she wasn't in full view of me. I felt stupid and a little crazy. But after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture and walls and told myself it was just a bad memory. Then, a few days ago, things got so much worse. Lynn left to go to a friend's, and I lounged on the couch and played a couple games on my laptop. Around 9 p.m., I hopped in the shower, and as I was washing the soap from my hair, I felt that awful feeling that I was being watched. I slowly opened my eyes and almost had a heart attack. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower curtain. Her entire head stretched into the shower, leaving just her body outside. Her long dark hair hung against the curtain, the ends dripping with water, her mouth hung open with a terrible grin, her eyes wide and red as if she hadn't blinked in a while. I screamed and jumped back against the wall. She hadn't moved nor smiled. And it didn't waver. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in 2 black streaks. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was fucking terrified. We stood like that for a few moments, neither of us saying a word. Finally, after what felt like forever, she slowly pulled her head back out of the shower, and I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved backwards towards the bathroom door. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed in the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I overreacted to some of you, but joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with the crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I paced in the bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. Suddenly, I heard a muffled sound as I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, straining to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on this other side of the door, giggling at her joke. I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed at being made to feel scared in my own house and made to hide in the bathroom for an hour. All for what? Some joke? If it was some joke, it was an awful one. What the fuck, Lynn? I snapped. This shit is getting really fucking annoying. I waited for her to apologize or to call me a jerk, but instead, I heard a faint moan. So quiet, I wondered if I heard it at all. And then, complete silence. Lynn? I called out, not able to even hide the shakiness in my voice. I got no response, just my own breathing. I swear to God, Lynn, just fucking stop it. I yelled, pounding my fist at the door. I waited for her to cuss me out, something I would expect from me talking to her like that. I never screamed at her before. But there was nothing, just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny I was scared, too afraid to open the damn door or to face my own wife. I waited another 30 minutes or so, which felt like a lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to spend the night hiding in the bathroom. So, I got down on my knees and peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway on top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I didn't know if I should be happy about that or not. I looked for a few minutes, waiting to see her head pop over the top step, but it never came. I stood up, my hand hovering over the door and mentally preparing myself to open it. I slowly turned the lock with shaky fingers, and I was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that still makes me feel nauseous when I think about it. A moan. Louder than before, but this time, I was able to tell where it was coming from. I turned my head to the closet door, to the closest door, as if in slow motion, and locked eyes with my wife, who was peeking out at me from the slight gap. Her eyes were still wide as ever, and her mouth was hanging open with the most grotesque, gaping smile I've ever seen. I didn't even scream. I was too scared for even that. Her hands were clasped to her chest, body trembling with sheer delight as if she could barely contain her excitement. A short, raspy moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. Somehow, I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open and ran as fast as I could all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and phone from the table in the living room before running outside to my car. I could hear her shrill laughter behind me, but I didn't see her getting closer. I didn't bother shutting the door. I drove away from the house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time, either from the fear or the cold. Maybe a little bit of both. I hadn't grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers, and my hair was still damp. I drove straight to my brother Chris's house, which was about 40 minutes away, ignoring any and every call or text that I got. I didn't check my phone until I was safely parked in my brother's driveway. Lynn had called 4 times and sent a flurry of texts, all wondering where I'd gone and why I left like that. I threw my phone at the dash in a rage, furious at her nonchalant attitude. My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in just a pair of boxers, but I told them to let me stay as long as I needed. Chris lent me some clothes and asked me what had happened. I told them that Lynn and I had a fight, but I didn't get into the details. I didn't want him to think I was overreacting, leaving my wife over a prank, even if it was a strange one. Hadn't I encouraged her for years to lighten up instead of being so serious all the time? I had wanted her to relax and loosen up, but this was definitely not what I had in mind. I tried to sleep on their sofa, but my brain wouldn't let me sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's face staring at me from inside the closet. Knowing she'd been in there with me the entire time made my skin crawl. She'd never left the fucking bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped inside the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut just to fool me. The mere thought of going back home gave me anxiety. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Chris ended up giving me a sleeping pill, so I was able to get a little rest. My sleep was filled with terrible dreams, all of Lynn's smiling face. I couldn't sleep properly that night. I woke up just as the sun started to rise. My sore body ached from the sofa, and I felt drained. I knew I'd have to call in at some point, but I didn't know what to say to her. I wouldn't be going home unless she gave me her word she would never do any more of that creepy shit. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal, serious self never looked so good to me. I was contemplating calling her and telling her that when that familiar feeling came over me. I was being watched. I was staring at the ceiling, my heart in my throat, I didn't want to look away, but the longer I ignored, the feeling got worse. My eyes drifted away from the ceiling, almost on their own. Her face was pressed up against the window beside the couch, staring down at me with that gaping smile. Drool dribbled down her lips, leaving 2 long streaks down the glass. I didn't know how long she'd been there, but something told me she'd been there quite a while, possibly all night. I didn't bother screaming, though I was afraid anger trumped any fear I felt at that moment. I jumped up from the couch and pumped my palm against the glass. Lynn, are you crazy? What the hell is wrong with you? Just go home! Now! She didn't move, and her ghastly expression never changed. If anything, her smile only grew, as if she'd never been more elated. I could hear Chris and his wife moving around the upstairs, as if Lynn could hear them from her own place outside. Her head twitched slightly in their direction, and she began to close her mouth slowly. Chris called my name from upstairs, obviously concerned. I turned to see him and his wife Rebecca hurrying down the steps. When I turned back to the window, Lynn was gone. The only sign she'd been there at all was the 2 streaks of drool dripping down the glass. I tried to explain Chris and Rebecca about waking up to see Lynn watching me through their window. They were skeptical, but who wouldn't be? Chris and I went outside on the spot in front of the window, but there were no footprints in the dirt, just a slight indent. Animal, probably, Chris guessed, and I didn't argue. He and Rebecca assumed I jumped the entire episode, but they didn't understand, and I was too worried to explain it to them. I called out from work that day and turned my cell phone off. I didn't want to face Lynn. Just talking to her was too much for me at that point. I really started to believe something was irreversibly wrong with her. That no matter what promises she'd made me, we'd never be the same again. The thought saddened me to my core. I cried most of the morning. By noon, I figured I was ready to confront her. Giving her one last chance to explain herself. I could at least give her that after 6 years, I told myself. I turned my phone on and saw dozens of texts she'd sent, all from a seemingly concerned wife. Can we talk? I love you. Please call me. I'm really worried. Can you answer? Just come home. And more of the same. All the texts telling me she loved me, she wanted me home, how worried she was, not a damn one addressing the crazy shit she pulled, like she hadn't been acting like a character from a Stephen King book. Even her texts were different. She normally texted novels just to tell me to pick up a loaf of bread. You'd think she'd have more to say after her bizarre shenanigans. I know it probably seems childish to some of you who were miles away from this situation, but if you saw the Lynn that looked at me, the look she gave me, how she scampered away on all fours like some wild animal, grinning at me from the inside of our closet like a lunatic, then you'd find my reaction was warranted. I ended up staying with Chris and Rebecca for another night. I didn't wake up yesterday until afternoon, and thankfully, I didn't see Lynn's face watching me through the window. I don't want to pry because it's not my place, but is this fight something that can be mended? Rebecca asked. She'd made us both a sandwich for lunch, and I knew she wanted to breach the subject without seeming too nosy. I don't know. She's like a different person, I said, choosing my words carefully. I still wasn't ready for her or Chris to know the full extent of the batshit craziness I've been dealing with. People change, Ben. But she's still the woman you married. Maybe you both just need to talk through your issues. Whatever's going on, I'm sure it can be fixed, she said, ever the peacemaker. I think it's beyond that now. I don't think talking would help. I just don't trust her, I said, the words strung in my heart. I missed and loved my wife, but how could I live with someone like that? Living in constant fear didn't sound too appealing. Lynn loves you. She has to be absolutely crushed, she said. I don't know about that. Well, she certainly seems like it to me. I've never seen her so upset. Very much unlike the Lynn I know, Rebecca said, shaking her head steadily. It took a full minute for her words to really sink in and what they did. I felt dread warming its way through my skin. Wait, what do you mean? You saw her? You saw Lynn? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Rebecca nodded casually as if the fact wasn't nightmare fuel. Maybe for her it wasn't. She stopped by this morning just after Chris left for work, she said, cleaning the plates from the table. I didn't see her car though. Maybe she took an Uber or something. Beck, what did she say? Did she come inside? I asked, sweat starting to break out of my forehead. I began looking around, examining corners as though a predator lurked behind them. No, she just asked if you were awake yet, and I said you weren't. I asked if she wanted to wake you, but she said no, just to let you sleep, she said as she washed the dishes. That's all? She didn't say anything else? I asked. No, she looked awful though, like she hadn't slept in days. I think you should call her. I got up from the table and thanked Rebecca for lunch. I felt a little bit better at the knowledge that at least she hadn't come inside. Still, I needed to double check that the doors were locked. I sat for a while trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't want to go home, but I felt that I owed it to Lynn, to help her if I could. Hadn't I sworn an oath to love and to honor her through sickness and in health? Clearly she was very sick. If she was sick, which I truly believe she was, I had to try and get her the help that she needed, but I didn't even know where to start. I didn't want to call the police, and besides, what the hell was I going to tell them? My wife was peeking at me. She was being creepy. As bizarre as she'd been, she still hadn't committed any crime. Not yet anyway. The police would have probably said that I was overreacting, but this wasn't some prank. It felt wrong. Dangerous even. Like something sinister lurked beneath her smile. I knew as her husband, I was well within my rights to have her committed, but what if she was simply acting normal in their presence? What if she'd obviously been able to fool Rebecca into thinking she was just a concerned wife? As long as the doctors didn't find her a danger to herself or to others, they'd have no choice but to release her after 72 hours. I felt lost and overwhelmed. So, I did what any husband in my position would do. I called her mother. I didn't want to, believe me. Her mother, Marianne, and I were never on the same terms. We were never on the best of terms. We never fought or anything like that, though. She just wasn't a very warm person and wasn't really easy to get along with. She hardly ever smiled, and when she did, only her lips would move into a thin-lipped smile, leaving her eyes as blank as before. She gave off this aura that felt like she was permanently on the offensive. I'd only met her twice, and both times were for such short visits. I got the impression she didn't approve of me for her daughter. Lynn always ushered us out quickly, as she didn't want me to feel uncomfortable, which I was grateful for. Being in her mother's company felt almost unbearable, like walking on grass. I was glad when we moved 3 states away so we didn't have to see her often. I was happy to avoid the woman, but I needed her help. I really didn't want to talk to her about
anything, but I had to talk to someone, and someone who knew Lynn better than I did. So I grit my teeth and did what I had to do.
Yes, she answered,
Always sounding irritated. Marian, it's me, Ben. Do you have a minute to talk? I asked. I could hear her cluck her tongue in irritation. I'm in the middle of writing some checks, but if you insist, I suppose I can spare a moment. What is it that you want to discuss, Ben?
She said coolly.
It's about Lynn. She's been acting strangely, and I was wondering if you'd had any idea whether there was something. I was quickly interrupted. It's a bit difficult to follow your rambling, Ben. What is it that you want from me? She asked. I could almost see her standing there in her thin sweater and slacks, tapping her fingernails impatiently on the table. I wanted to know if you'd ever noticed any odd behavior or possibly mental health issues, I asked. There was a long, uncomfortable pause that I couldn't tell if it was because she was just thinking or something else. Finally, a few seconds, she spoke. I'm not sure if this is one of your jokes, Benjamin, but if so, I don't find the humor in it. Now, I have a businesses to attend to, as I've said, so if you don't mind, she said, but I cut her off before she got rid of me. Marian, it's not a joke. I'm sincerely concerned about Lynn's mental health. Her behavior has been very erratic lately. I'm very worried about her, and I figured as her mother, you would be as well. I said, my frustration evident in my voice. If you're truly concerned, then I suggest you get the health professionals involved. I don't know what you expect of me. She snapped. I couldn't tell if she was seconds away from hanging up. For some reason, I was desperate to not let her. I had the feeling that she knew a lot more than she was letting on. Please, if not for me, for Lynn. I tried. I heard a faint, shaky intake of her breath, as if she were trying to hold her steely persona together but failing. Marian, what's... Benjamin. I don't know what to tell you. My only advice would be to seek professional help. Do not call here again. Goodbye. I tried to call out to her, but she'd hung up. I tried to wrap my head around the call and her refusal to help me. Even if she didn't like me, why didn't she want to help her own daughter? I couldn't understand that. I tried to replay the conversation, desperate to find something that I'd missed. After a while, I almost gave up until I remembered her last words to me. Seek professional help. She'd said those words with a bit of urgency. I could have just been gasping at straws, but no. I was sure her voice had changed ever so slightly when she'd said that, as if they were very important. What had she meant? I assumed she'd be referring to medical professionals, but maybe she was referring to someone else. Someone that she didn't, for some reason, feel comfortable saying directly. Or maybe I was just desperate. I waited for Chris to get home after a very long and exhausting conversation with him and Rebecca. I convinced them that Lynn truly needed psychiatric help. I didn't tell them everything. I wasn't prepared to go into it yet, but I told them about our last encounter, how she'd hidden in the bathroom, peeking at me from the closet. They were obviously shocked, but thankfully, they believed me. They too just wanted to help her. Still, they didn't think it was all that serious. Weird maybe, but not dangerous. They just kept saying that Lynn had to be playing some kind of weird joke. Maybe for YouTube? Rebecca offered, if only half-heartedly. Chris didn't think we should involve the police just yet. He offered instead to go with me, and I readily accepted. He reasoned that calmly talking to her, trying to coax her into going willingly was the best recourse. I agreed to do it his way. At least, I wouldn't be going into that house alone. We drove over this morning, just after breakfast. There was no way I was going at night. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach began doing somersaults. Her car wasn't there, but I still didn't let my guard down. The front door was ajar, and for a split second, I thought we'd see her eyes staring through the gap. I was shaking and starting to sweat. Chris, however, was fine. He waited for me to open the door, his hands in his pockets like he was going on a fucking stroll through the park. I envied his ignorance. I pushed the door open and was immediately hit with the stench of rot. Chris smelled it too, and he walked in on the house behind me and his nose scrunched up. "What do you guys use to clean the floors around here? Shit?" Chris mumbled. "Shut up," I said, my eyes darting around for any signs of Lynn. The house was deadly quiet and dark despite being 10 in the morning. All the curtains were closed up tight, refusing to allow any sunlight inside. If I hadn't left it just 2 days prior, I'd have thought the house was abandoned. We moved through each room, carefully checking any place she might hide, occasionally calling her name. "Why the fuck are you looking under the couch?" Chris asked eventually. "Aren't we looking for your wife?" he asked, looking at me like I was a moron. "Just go upstairs," I whispered. He shook his head but followed me up the stairs to check the bathroom and spare bedroom. On the way up, my shoes crunched over pieces of glass that looked to be littered over a few steps. I noticed that one of Lynn and my wedding portraits that hung on the wall, the staircase, had been smashed. The frame hung crookedly, the glass removed. I stared at the picture, a lump foaming in my throat. We had taken the photo just after leaving the church, after saying our vows. She looked so beautiful in her white gown. I looked at Lynn's beautiful face. I never dreamed her face would ever be a source of terror for me. We climbed the rest of the steps and checked the spare bedroom, but it looked completely untouched. I was hesitant to go into the bathroom, my fear from that night coming back to me all at once. Chris noticed and offered to go in by himself, but I couldn't let him do that, so we walked in together, checking the closet and the shower. The bathroom looked as if it hadn't been touched since the night I left. "I don't think she's here, Ben. Why don't you pack some clothes and we'll try coming back tomorrow or something," Chris said. I nodded and we went into our bedroom and shoved some clothes into a duffel bag. When I checked inside our closet, I came across the source of the smell and gagged. Chris took one look and lost all color in his face. He had to go stand by the stairs to get away from the sight and smell. I gazed down in shock at what lay inside my bedroom closet. Soaking in the rug were at least a dozen eyeballs, all carefully laid out in pairs. Some were as large as a quarter, while others were as tiny as a marble. I stared down at the eyes she'd collected from small animals, and I wondered how she'd gotten them, and shuddered at the thought. "Man, I thought I had it with Rebecca's shoe addiction, but fuck me, your wife's in here collecting eyeballs," Chris said, gagging. "Ben, I think we should go. I'm getting nauseous." "All right." I grabbed my duffel and shut the closet door in my new nightmare. I stepped out into the hall and took a deep breath of air. I could taste the rot on my tongue, and I couldn't help but gag. "Who the fuck lines up eyeballs in their closet like that?" Chris mumbled. "I tried to tell you she needed help," I said. "She doesn't need help, Ben. She needs a fucking exorcist," he said. "You coming or what? I can't stand the smell anyway." His words died in his throat, and his eyes grew wide with fear. I didn't ask him why. I could feel it. Someone was watching me, and I didn't think it was the eyes in the closet. I turned around, my eyes slowly scanning the bedroom. I whispered as I finally saw what we'd missed. Under the bed, curled on her side, watching us with excitement of a kid on Christmas morning, was my wife. She held her hands together just under her chin, and they were shaking eagerly. Now that she knew she'd been found, I could hear the quiet noises she was making, a sort of hiccuping sound in her throat, as if the excitement was just too much for her. It was unnerving to say the least, wide eyes and that same huge smile. Everything in me told me to run, but I forced it anyway. This was my wife. No matter how twisted, she was still the woman I married, and I had to help her. Lynn, I said softly. She didn't respond, but her head bobbed back and forth in two quick little movements as if she was nodding. Baby, I just want to help, okay? Can you let me do that? I asked. I had taken a single step forward, approaching her like some kind of dangerous animal. I love you, Lynn, I sobbed softly. Taking another step closer, she let a tiny moan escape her wide open mouth, and I had to resist the urge to run. Her shoulders were starting to quiver, and her eyes grew wide as saucers. I crunched down so I could see her better, and immediately saw the blood her hands were covered in. They trembled more the closer I got, as if she was barely able to contain herself. Lynn, are you hurt? Are you bleeding? I said. She bobbed her head again, her bloody fingers moving up and down as if playing an invisible piano. They occasionally grazed her chin, leaving smears of blood on her skin. I wanted to recoil in disgust. The smell was coming off of her was revolting. I could feel the vomit trying to climb up my throat. Her lips were dry and stretched thin, blood seeping between the cracks. I knew she wouldn't come out of her own, but I didn't want to leave her in the state that she was. I scooted closer and reached out to her. The excited hiccuping sounds got louder and her hands shook, fingers flexing. It was then that I could see the blood oozing from between her fingers. Oh my God, Lynn, you're bleeding, I said instinctively. I reached out to take her hand, but before I could even touch her, her hand sprang out towards me. A sharp pain shot through my arm, and I fell back on my ass. My arm burned, and I couldn't see the blood dripping onto the carpet. I looked back at her in shock, and I saw her grinning madly, her fingers clutching a large shard of glass. You all right in there? Chris asked from behind me. I turned my head slightly and nodded to him, cradling my arm to my chest. When I turned back to face Lynn, I saw her focus had shifted. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She wasn't smiling anymore either. She was staring past me, her eyes glaring at Chris the way a hungry lion might stare at an antelope. Her mouth was still hanging open, but it was twisted into a snarl. I got to my feet and began walking towards down the hall, afraid to take my eyes off her. Are you bleeding? Chris asked. The moment the words left his mouth, Lynn started fast scooting out under the bed, the glass shard still in her fist. Chris, run! Go! I yelled. He must have been too afraid to move because a second later I felt my back bump into him. He was standing at the top of the stairs, staring at the horror that was my wife. Lynn had crawled completely out of the bed and stood in the bedroom doorway. Her face twisted in rage. Her whole body was visibly tense. Blood ran down her fingers onto the floor. Jesus, Lynn. You, playing hide and seek? I reached back and pushed him towards the steps. Move your ass, Chris, I said quietly and as firmly as I could. Lynn bobbed her head in a fast, sharp motions and began to grin, stretching her mouth open wider and wider as her chin seemed to touch her chest. I heard Chris mutter a prayer and that he was running down the stairs. I stood at the top of the steps, stuck between the love for a woman who clearly needed our help and self-preservation. I only want to help, I said, choking back tears, her eyes focused on me once more as she slowly lifted the glass, holding it out in front of her. And then she started sprinting towards me, grinning with utter excitement. Thankfully, my body took over and I flew down the stairs, skipping 2 or 3 at a time. I made it to the front door before I left. I felt her leap onto my back, wrapping her arms around my neck. Her open mouth next to my ear so that I could hear those terrible hiccuping sounds up close. I shook her off me, knocking her to the floor. I felt a searing pain in my back as she went, but I tore open the front door and bolted into my car. Chris was standing in the front yard talking on the phone with the police. I didn't say a word, just ran onto my car and jumped in. Chris took the hint and followed me, still on the line with 911. I reached the rearview mirror. I was sure I'd see her there, running after us, but I never did. I went straight to the ER and got 11 stitches on my arm and 3 on my back. The police asked a lot of questions and went back to the house and did a search of the house, but Lynn wasn't there. They advised me to stay with a friend or relative for a while and file a restraining order as soon as I could, but none of those things would matter. Somehow, I just knew. I dropped Chris off at home and went to a motel an hour away. I wanted to put as much distance between me and Lynn as I could. This was where I'd been the last 4 hours. I thought maybe the police would find her. Maybe they'd get her the help she desperately needs. But now, I don't think so. Because 40 minutes ago, I got a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. I found you. And a picture attached. The picture was a dark and grainy image, but I instantly knew what it was. There was no mistaking my wife's eye. I started typing this out immediately after. I don't know what to do. I'm alone. I'm scared. And I can't help but feel that I'm being watched. The end. Did you like that one? That was chilling. You loved it? Thank you. I really liked it too. Hello, robot. I don't know if you're still here. Kirianu. Evil Giantess Lily, thank you for being here. Thank you for the follow. Happy anniversary, Nashter. My voice is scary, sneakerhead. Hello, Q's. Hello, Geyser Chamber. And hello, Seven. It was really good. You'll keep your PVC pipe next to you in your sleep. Well, it is always important to keep yourself protected. I'm glad you guys like that one. I like that one too. It really creeped me out when she started saying, maybe I've just gotten better at it. I guess we'll never really know what truly happened to Lynn, but it's an open ending, so we can all just leave the rest to our imaginations. You've gotten too better at it. I'm really glad you're all enjoying our story times, our weekly story time. Because I do truly enjoy reading to all of you every Tuesday night as I tuck you all into bed. The next one is very, very short. I guess This would be a little break for my throat. This was written 6 years ago, so maybe some of you are already familiar with it. Yes, it was that long ago. 6 years. It's been quite some time. I wonder what happened to this soul now. This one is entitled Mimicry. I was worried when I first inherited Claudette that she would be lonely and depressed. I knew parrots were supposed to be social creatures, but I was barely equipped to handle one, much less get her a companion. Aunt June, who had generously given the bird to me after discovering how loud and energetic she could be, assured me that Claudette was an independent sort and would be fine on her own. Claudette and I had a rocky start. I was timid around her large beak and sharp claws, and she was slow to trust yet another new person. She'd apparently had a number of homes in 25 years, all of whom had given her up the same as Aunt June had. That was mostly why I kept her. I felt sorry for her and wanted her to finally have a home, even if it meant a steep learning curve. We had what felt like a very long period of adjustment during which I learned that getting bitten, while painful, could have been much worse, and she started to at least recognize me as the hand that fed her. When I discovered she was happiest in my small, screened-in porch, I moved her cage there and gave her free run of it, which almost improved our relationship. It took a lot of time, patience, and treats, but eventually, it got to the point that she would fly over to me whenever I went out and sit on my arm, while she inhaled whatever I brought her. If I had been worried about her getting lonely when I was away, those concerns were quickly banished when I realized she was making fast friends with the mockingbirds who nested in a tree behind my apartment. They trade calls and squawk at each other throughout the day, which sometimes got me in a little trouble with my more noise-sensitive neighbors. But that wasn't anything a few homemade cookies and apology cards couldn't smooth over. I'd never considered a parrot a pet before, but Claudette proved to be a sweet, smart girl once you got past her initial orneriness, and I learned that she had a fairly extensive and sometimes colorful vocabulary and was an excellent little mimic. I also found out that over the course of a few months while I was at work, she'd apparently been teaching the mockingbirds a thing or two. I was sitting on the porch one evening giving Claudette a little neck scratch before going to make dinner when I heard a soft but a very distinct voice coming from somewhere overhead. "Shit," it said. I jumped, having not seen or heard anyone approach. And I looked around, but my little corner of the apartment complex was quiet and no one was outside. On my lap, Claudette started to bob her head, her fingers ruffling over slightly. "Shit," the voice said again. "Shit," Claudette answered. She and the voice went back and forth a few more times, enthusiastically shouting one of their favorite words until I rushed her inside in embarrassment and to keep whoever was taunting her from going any further. It wasn't until I saw one of her mockingbird friends swoop by the porch a few times, obviously in search of Claudette, that I realized the voice I'd been hearing hadn't been someone encouraging her naughty behavior, but it had been the mockingbirds mimicking her. Claudette had taught the wild birds to swear. It was going to take a lot more cookies to get back to my neighbor's good sides when they figured out that one. Instead of moving her inside, I decided to try and encourage her to use sweeter phrases that I hoped the mockingbirds would pick up on. "Hello," I said over and over again. "Hello," Claudette said. "Shit," the mockingbird said. Shit indeed. I hadn't even known mockingbirds could talk, much less how to get them to pick up new words, so I scoured the internet and asked around, hoping for some insight. "They just repeat whatever they hear often," one bird enthusiast replied when I left a comment on the forum. "They'll pick up whatever something else says soon. A mockingbird near me constantly calls my dogs for ages until it picked up a new bird song. Good luck." Okay, I told myself I could wait them out. In the meantime, I kept working with Claudia to clean up her own language and spent a bit of time every night repeating the words to her and rewarding her when she got them right. I took a few more weeks and months, but the swearing was definitely on a decline and I hadn't heard the mockingbirds repeating her anymore, so I was counting it a victory. One morning, when I went out to feed her before I left for work, she bobbed and paced along her rug with her usual enthusiasm, but I noticed she was making these odd, raspy noises like she couldn't quite catch her breath. I took her up on my arm and gave her a quick one over while stroking her back. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Hello," she said, and the odd breathing stopped. I waited for a little while, but almost enough time to make me late, but she seemed fine and I rushed out to go to work. The next morning, however, the low, rasping noises were back. She again came over to me, fluffed and bobbed, all the while making the ragged breathing sounds. Outside, the mockingbirds were responding with usual clicking noises. I didn't pay much attention to them, of course, too concerned for my poor parrot. Unable to leave her again when she was in such an obvious state of distress, I called my boss to let her know I had a family emergency and hurried Claudette to the nearby vet. I told them in a quavering voice that I was sure she had some kind of serious illness and explained that she was having trouble breathing, and they ushered me into a room to wait for the doctor. When he came in, I told him about the sounds and begged him to listen to Claudette. She was sitting in her travel cage, preening quietly, completely undisturbed by the fact that her life was hanging in the balance. "I swear she sounded horrible yesterday and today," I insisted. "Sometimes these things come and go," Dr. Graham said gently. "Can you do me the favor? Imitate the sound she was making." I quickly did as he asked, hoping I'd be accurate enough for him to understand the severity of the situation, and immediately, Claudette started to mimic me. Dr. Graham hid a small smile behind his hand before catching himself becoming serious again. "She's fine, Stacy. She may have, overheard you during some nighttime activities and is just repeating those sounds." "What?" "I think she heard you with your partner, during intimate moments." Claudette emphasized his statement with an unmistakable little moan. With my face burning bright red, I packed up my bird, mumbled an apology and thanked him, and practically ran out of the office. "You've been listening to my neighbors?" I accused a now whistling Claudette on the way home. "Or has someone been playing their TV too loud? How did you learn to make those noises?" It certainly hadn't been from me. That much I knew. Whatever it was, it must have been going on for a while if she was starting to mimic it. I just couldn't go around asking my neighbors if they were getting down and dirty with the windows open, so for now, I'd just have to try and keep a closer eye at what she was getting exposed to. When I released her back to the porch, she squawked a chorus of hellos to the mockingbirds who snagged back and then settled on top of her cage for a nap in the sun. I sat on the porch with her for a good portion of the day, but I didn't hear anything particularly telling and eventually gave up when it became uncomfortably warm outside. I still poked in my head out on occasion, but the most unusual thing I heard was the mockingbirds making their newly picked up clicking sound. While it was familiar, I couldn't quite place where I'd heard it before and dismissed it. Claudette's heavy breathing sound started to become more and more frequent part of our morning. Along with the occasional moan, and ever so often, she'd mumble to herself, "Pretty, pretty, pretty." At least that was an improvement on shit. She and the mockingbirds continued their back and forth, and I got used to their clicking noises, the same way I had heard their swearing. It was especially bad in the morning when Claudette was doing what I came to call her breathing exercises. Click, click, click. Click, click, click. Rinse and repeat until midday. I just had to wait them out, and they'd eventually move to some new sound to try and drive me crazy with. But the more I heard it, the more I realized there was something about the click, which was becoming more refined and distinct every day. It kept nagging at me. I knew that sound, and given a bit more time, I was sure I'd pinpoint exactly what they were imitating, but it continued to elude me. "How's Claudette doing?" my sister asked while we drank wine and had our weekly Thursday night phone call. I was sitting in my living room in my pajamas, little more than a tank top and a pair of shorts that were too small to wear out in public. With my phone in one hand and my glass in the other, I'd left my sliding glass door leading to the porch open just wide enough for Claudette to waddle inside if she wanted to join me. "She's fine, just doing that nasty breathing thing." "Did you ever figure out who taught it to her?" "I'm leaning towards the Johnsons. They've always struck me as exhibition types." Raina giggled. "Aren't they old people?" "Yeah, and they need some lovin' too." While we laughed, I heard a series of very soft clicks through the open door. "Oh no," I said. "The mockingbirds are doing the thing I told you about. Maybe you can hear them and tell me what the damn noise is." I sprang up from my couch and crossed the living room to yank back the sheer curtain hanging across the slider. The clicking stopped immediately. Beside me, Claudette paced back and forth across her cage top, mumbling all the while, "Pretty, pretty, pretty." A brush on the other side of the screen shook just slightly. The light from inside my apartment reflected the porch screen, making it difficult to see outside, and I froze. "I can't hear them," Raina said in my ear. "Stacy?" The bushes rustled again. Claudette started to make the shuddering, raspy breathing sounds. From the trees overhead, the mockingbirds responded with their clicks. I now recognized the sound with sudden, chilling clarity. "Raina," I said as calmly as I could, "I think someone's in my bushes." As soon as the words left my mouth, a dark figure sprang upright and was making a mad dash around the side of the apartment building. It happened so quickly that I couldn't make out much. No features, nothing significant, just dark clothes and maybe a hat. And then he was gone. Raina was asking me in a near panic if she should call the police while I was too stunned to answer. It had taken months for me to teach Claudette words, months for her to pick up new words, months for her to learn to mimic accurately. No doubt it would have taken the same amount of time listening to someone breathing heavily and moaning to repeat the sounds accurately. My stomach dropped, fast and far, and I thought I might vomit. She hadn't learned those sounds from noisy neighbors or a television show. She learned it from the man who'd been hiding outside my apartment, panting like a dog while he was watching me. I stumbled back against the slider and scrambled to get inside again. Over my shoulder, one of the mockingbirds called out in the night from a treetop. Click, click. The perfect imitation of a camera shutter. The end. I bet you all weren't expecting that, were you? Mag, thank you so much for being here. How have you been, Mag? I missed you. Thank you so much for the resub. How was your vacation? I saw you went somewhere. How was it? This one was quite scary because for some reason, it's the living that frightens me more. Is this the story that you knew of, Saxy? It kind of reminded you of a two-shot manga about a cockatoo making its owner's stalker who breeds in at night. Oh, I see. Hello, King War. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome. What time is it for you? Did you eat yet? I also remember it keeps creeping up in my head. That's why it gives me chills when I'm done. When you're alone, yes. Hello, Monkey. Thank you so much for the follow, Monkey. What a cute name. I like saying that, Monkey. How are you all tonight? Are we all in the same time zone? Did you all eat yet? You got over it, but you guess it's back. Yeah, stalkers are quite scary, aren't they? They're a special little breed. I remember my cousin told me the story about someone who used to follow her back to her dorm when she was in college. Especially when it can be anyone and can happen anytime, anywhere. That is true, Enwa. You remember a story where a guy was murdered and his bird witnessed the murder and used the bird as the detector and found the murderer? Yes, birds are very smart. Mhm. Well, some birds are. But yes, my cousin, one time, she was walking from her school to her dorm at night. She had a late class and she could feel someone walking behind her. She tried to dismiss it for a while, but when the walking started getting faster, she started running. And the person behind her started running as well. And eventually, it stopped when she reached the gate of her dorm and she got inside. She didn't see who did it though, but ever since that happened, she always asked her sister, who was my other cousin, to walk home with her. Or at least if she wasn't gonna be able to get home early,
She always asks someone to walk with her. It is very scary having a stalker. Yes. Sometimes our mind plays tricks with us and makes us fear things, but it's the kind that happens to you firsthand. The kind that you personally experience that sticks with you. You had a mild one, Saxy. I've been fortunate enough to not experience a stalker. When you were 14, some creepy guy kept following you in your subdivision, but after 5 years it stopped. That's good. Maybe it stopped after 5 years because you've gotten too old for him. But disregard what I just said. I don't want that to stick to your head. You developed the sensation that you kept looking back. Let's hope it doesn't happen again, Saxy. Hello, Jay. Yes, we're doing spooky, spoopy vibes tonight. Tuesday nights are dedicated to me telling all of you a bedtime story. Hello, Mag. You are in Japan for 8 days, driving around and walking around Tokyo. Oh, that's so nice, Mag. I hope you had fun. Did you make a lot of memories? Did you meet new people? I miss Japan. I'll be going back to Japan in July for my mother's birthday, but I'll only be staying there for 5 days. Hello, Gazri. I can't creep you out. Well, we're on our last story for the night because it's 10:30. Your eyes are having a bless. Yes, Mag, I missed you. I'm so happy you're back. What you would give to go to Toho Studios and meet the G-Man himself. Wouldn't that be the dream? But yes, let me drink my water and we'll proceed with our last story for the night. You missed my voice as well, Mag? Well, my VODs are always up for all of you. Oh, you want to be called a good boy, Mag? Good boy, Mag. Good boy. You're a good boy, Mag. Good boy. You like Japan, it's your dream country, and you want to visit it once, yes. Everyone should try and visit Japan once. Being a tourist in Japan is very delightful. Everybody is kind to you. You're dead? Mag, we're all dead here. Don't worry. When the cherry blossoms bloom, maybe. Oh, then you'd want to visit during spring, like the first half of the year. Around February to April, I guess. If you're lucky. But this is our last story for tonight. It's quite short, but it is famous. This one is called The Smiling Man.
This was written 11 years ago, so it's really, really old. Maybe you've heard about it. I've definitely heard the title before, but I don't know the context of the story. So, if this is a flashback for you, I'm happy you'll be able to reminisce. And if you've never heard of this story before, then maybe we'll both be in for a treat. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite, but all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police patrolled park quite a few ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street on my side, there was the silhouette of a man, dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stopped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer and closer until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, his head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky, his mouth formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing in 1 foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward. His smile was wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment and watched the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he was standing and to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance of the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me, and I looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him. And then he started moving toward me again. He looked giant. Exaggerated tiptoe steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. Except, he was moving very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at that. But I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. Instead, what came out was a whimper. Oh, what the fuck? Regardless of whatever or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around, very slowly, and started dance walking away. Just like that, not wanting to turn back to him again. I just watched him go until he was far enough away to be almost out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't just moving away anymore. Neither was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side of the road and back onto a better lit road with specific traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months, and after that night, I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see. The end. I told you all that was a short story. That was the story of the smiling man. It's like the Syrian lady. Ooh, what is this Syrian lady? I've never heard of her. Also, hello, Papa Bacardi. How have you been? I hoped you were able to read out our last story for the night. You were all a little bit spoiled tonight. I gave you 5 stories instead of our usual 3. Although some of them were quite short. But anyway, I hope you're all comfortable in your beds. It's time to sleep now. Yeah, my voice. What's with my voice? Yeah, I guess a little bit. My throat has been... how do I say this? It's not been agreeing with me for the past couple of weeks. Apparently, there's a lady in Syria that dances in the streets in the middle of the night. If you look at her or bother her, she chases you with a knife. Oh, how exciting. Enjoying while listening to Pancit Canton? Yum. What flavor is it? Thank you for spoiling us in good stories. You're welcome, Inoa. You're all always welcome. Hot and spicy because you like hot and spicy. I hope you enjoy your Pancit Canton, Papa Bacardi. But like all good things, tonight has to come to an end. I will miss all of you, but until then, you all stay and be good little boys and girls.
dreams. As usual, you know how it goes. Thank you for being here with me tonight. I hope you're all comfortable in bed. Those were our stories for tonight. Good night, sweet dreams, and rest in peace. Goodbye. Mwah. Go to sleep.